Get ready for a cosmic upgrade. Did you know the Galactic Core is considered a cosmic gateway and a source of universal wisdom? Scientists even discovered massive amounts of prebiotic molecules, the building blocks of life, there in 2022. Hey there, Truth Seeker. Welcome to the Star Kittens community where we discuss 13-sign astrology. Are you in alignment with your divine design? Do you want to master the metaphysical reality? Open the doors of perception. Each planetary body is an archetype, a template, if you will, that helps us interpret human behavior and the world around us. The more awake and aware we are, the more synchronicity will show up in your life. Our focus today is the Sagittarius Full Moon and the womb of creation, a supermassive black hole located at the center of the Milky Way. We will also spotlight and interpret the massive Grand Cross involving the Sun in Gemini, Ceres in Pisces, and Arcturus in Virgo. To help us reach more souls with this important message, please like, share, and subscribe. There is a lot going on, so let's jump in. Kia ora, David.
Kia ora.
I'm so pleased that we get to talk about Ceres today. For those who haven't heard of this planetary body before, it is spelled Ceres. Because here at the top of the South Island, it definitely seems like Mother Nature has a message for us with the amount of rain we've been getting. It's almost like this little push, like, are you listening? So please share with us what your intuition told us of what to focus on today.
This is given that there's a grand cross, a stand up and take notice message from the cosmos. Absolutely is the way I interpret those. Source has activated the galactic core, and by that I mean that when the moon entered Sagittarius, which was a few days before the full moon, there was an activation of a point in the astrological configuration, but also in the constellations that brings through very powerful messages, and we'll talk about that today. And in addition to that, there's this rare grand cross, which involves 4 planetary bodies, and we'll show it for those watching on the screen. The picture painted in the sky at this full moon is one that signals immense change is upon humanity. Ceres, that's the asteroid Ceres, represents the Earth Mother and our connection to her abundance. Arcturus, the fixed star, is the guardian protector of the 7 stars of the Big Dipper constellation, or Ursa Major is the technical name, also known as the Great Bear. Arcturus' appearance in the night sky signals a change of season. In mythology, Arcturus represents justice and equity. To the Egyptians and Syrians, Arcturus was known as the keeper of the heavens. The Sun in Gemini, of course, opposite the full moon in Sagittarius, represents duality and polarity. And for more on our interpretation of Gemini, please check out our prior podcast. The Sun's presence in Gemini amplifies conversations and communication through the mediums of radio, television, books, and the internet. Gemini represents how we learn, this is the Sun, interpret, think, and intellectually evolve, whereas Sagittarius, on the other side, presides over knowledge, the fields of academia, philosophy, and systems of belief. Sagittarius domains are education, science, technology, and engineering and math, what some may recognize as STEM. His other domains are epistemology, which is to do with our roots, both individually but also collectively. Where did we come from? His other domains include also metaphysics. What is our place in the omniverse, the multiverse, the Milky Way? Ethics. How do we behave? Our conduct and the consequences of that falls under Sagittarius domain. Governance is another of his domains. That is, how do we manage the collective commons, that of land, water, and air, which of course land and water are part of Ceres domain as well. And logic. And this isn't a part of Gemini, but it also finalizes, if you like, in Sagittarius. But logic is a part of Sagittarius domain. That is, how do we reason? How do we argue? How do we identify using our mind fallacies? How do we discern? We talked a lot about discernment last time when we spoke of Gemini. Overall, this full moon is about discovery. It is a time of intense revelation and realization about our individual and collective purpose, our history as a species, and our reason for being.
Yeah, as you said, where do we come from? I had a conversation with someone today at the market, and they were like, "Oh, and these children are quarter Dutch, and I am half Dutch." And what I really appreciate about the way that Maori see it is you're Maori, and you carry that resonance in your DNA, whether it is diluted or not. You carry that history of those people, and I think that's the same with any culture. I mean, you have a beautiful 50-50 in your DNA, but you're carrying that resonance of both your father and your mother. That's you. It makes you whole. So knowing where you come from, and I think embracing that part of you, whether you are quarter, half, or whatever, it is you, and you are a whole person. So it's interesting how this is coming up now. You and I had another conversation earlier this week about Sagittarius. So it's fascinating information that you have for us. But I am very keen to find out more about the history of this galactic core, this supermassive black hole as such.
Yeah, and to be clear, the galactic core gets activated whenever the sun or the moon travels through Sagittarius. So, of course, once a year, we see the sun moving through there, and the moon moves a little more quickly than that. But anytime there's a planetary body going through Sagittarius, this energy comes out. So when I was, as I do, contemplating, meditating, and being mindful of what to bring through, and I'm always in this space when I think about what do we talk about today during our podcast, and it came to me immediately about the galactic core. So giving a nod to Sagittarius and his role as the keeper, if you like, or the guardian over education and science and history and academics and so on, I thought we would start with a little history of the galactic core because it's very important to understand at least what's in the public domain, I guess, about this particular subject. Firstly, the galactic core is considered to be the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Interstellar dust prevents the visible study of the galactic core. So what astronomers do is they use interferometry equipment, which is a instrument or instruments that use light, radio, and sound waves to observe the phenomena. Of course, these days they can send probes out, but those are no good because of this interstellar dust. Now, it's very interesting if you just bear with me, and I'll build into this. Therefore, interpretations of the galactic core or the super black hole that exists at the galactic core, which is in Sagittarius, can only come to us not through the visible technologies, but via the gamma ray, the X-ray, the infrared wavelength technologies that these interferometry instruments use to pick up these frequencies. We thus observe the galactic core through what we would call etherical instruments, which are the unseen realms. After World War II in the 1940s, a team of astronomers located at Dover Heights in Sydney, Australia, used interferometry to discover some of the first interstellar and intergalactic radio sources, at that time in Taurus and Virgo. Of course, under the 13th sign, they may have been in different constellations, but we'll go with that for now. In 1954, this same team at Dover Heights in Sydney discovered an intense energy point source sitting at the center of Sagittarius A constellation. In 1958, the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, decided to adopt the position of Sagittarius A as the true zero point for the system of galactic latitude and longitude, which they named the Galactic Core. Then, and I was blown away by this, in July 2022, astronomers reported the discovery of massive amounts of prebiotic molecules, including those associated with RNA. Of course, there's DNA and RNA are two parts of our genetic structure. They discovered these prebiotic molecules emanating from and locating and circulating in the galactic center of the Milky Way galaxy. Prebiotic molecules, I had to look this up, are organic molecules considered to be the potential building blocks for the formation of biomolecules like amino acids, nuclear bases, and lipids, which are essential for life. They represent the chemical ingredients that may have spontaneously formed and assembled into the first living organisms. Prebiotic molecules are studied in the context of the origins of life, i.e. that of epistemology and metaphysics, which is the domain of Sagittarius. Prebiotic conditions refer to the environmental conditions that are thought to have existed on early Earth that are believed to have been conducive to the formation of these prebiotic molecules, such as the presence of water, of course the domain of Ceres, atmospheric gases, and energy sources like UV radiation or volcanic activity. Scientists studying prebiotic molecules now understand how these simple building blocks could have actually self-assembled and evolved into the complex molecules and systems found in today's living organisms. This field of research is crucial for understanding the origins of life on Earth. Ergo, Sagittarius is therefore the root of all knowledge.
Yeah. Wow. What a cool little rabbit hole you went in researching this kind of information. It's very exciting
Yeah.
to know. Mm. So that's the scientific part, galactic core. How does it in the mythology, what kind of role does it play for us?
Well, I think the first thing about the science, and we often do this, we'll talk about the history, the mythology, the science, theology as well. And the reason that we do this when we're talking, providing astrology interpretations, is that there is common understanding. There are domains of understanding out there in the world, which is the field in the area of both Sagittarius and Gemini. So we're talking about conversations and communication. And we're talking about Ceres being the mother, the Earth Mother. So all of this comes together. And of course, Sagittarius, this prebiotic discovery, these prebiotic molecules coming from the galactic core, is very important in the context of where humans are evolving to, because that knowledge has only been at least made available to us since 2022. That was only 3 years ago. So that's fascinating in and of itself. So let's overlay this galactic core, again, activated when the moon began her transit through Sagittarius. The galactic core mythology and astrology is fascinating as well. In these two disciplines of astrology and mythology, the galactic center is located, of course, also in the constellation of Sagittarius. This predates, of course, this knowledge predates, the astrological knowledge predates the discoveries in 1940s and 1950s and 2022, which is fascinating again in and of itself. So astrologers have long said that the galactic center or core is located in the constellation of Sagittarius, and of course now science is backing that up. And it's been activated from the moment that Sagittarius moon, or the moon, entered this constellation. And it's been amplified by this grand cross, which involves Arcturus, Ceres, the Earth Mother, and the Gemini Sun. The galactic core in astrology and mythology is considered a powerful cosmic gateway, a source of intense energy, and a point of connection to universal wisdom and consciousness. Ancient cultures like the Mayan and the Egyptians associated the galactic core with the origin and destination of souls, viewing it as a cosmic womb or as a source of divine energy. Astrologers often see the galactic core as a point of otherworldly understanding and a doorway to a broader universal experience or perspective, i.e., that of Sagittarius discovery and knowledge. The galactic core is considered a source of high frequency light, and of course the scientists are saying exactly the same thing. Gamma frequencies, infrared frequencies, X-ray frequencies are high frequency light. The astrologers have been saying that for a while, of course. That high frequency light is said to influence both collective and personal evolution. Remember that the Mayans believe that the galactic core is the source of the womb of creation and therefore the source of our soul originally. All of this, astrology, mythology, and science, converge, and they are all saying the same thing. We discovered the same thing last time when we spoke about Gemini, and prior to that about Ophiuchus and the ether, and how the scientific community, of course in the theological, the theosophical, and the philosophical, and the astrological communities are actually beginning to align on some of these things. Many believe that the galactic core in Sagittarius represents a connection to divine truth and expansive consciousness. The expansion, of course, coming from the guardian of Sagittarius, which is Jupiter. Its placement in an individual's birth chart can offer insights into that individual's life purpose and potential for growth. Where, then, is the galactic core located in your specific 13 sign configuration? The galactic center is sometimes referred to as the cosmic womb, and we've touched on that before, or the uterus of the Milky Way galaxy, a place where souls are said to enter and exit. Ancient civilizations, I touched on the Maya, and the Egyptians incorporated the galactic center into their creation myths and cosmological beliefs. The Milky Way itself is personified in some mythologies like the Egyptian goddess Nut, who was believed to birth souls through the cosmic womb of the galactic center. The constellation Sagittarius is therefore associated with the galactic center, or the galactic core, in mythology, and it is sometimes linked to figures representing wisdom, expansion, and exploration. Some followers of the Sirian High Council, this is Sirius star system, or the Sirian star seeds, some followers of the Sirian High Council believe that the galactic core is linked to the 8th dimensional stargates within Earth's meridians, which are located in Jiuan, China, at Lop Nor on the Tibetan border with China, and which is of course the home to the Dalai Lama, and in the Aral Sea in Kazakhstan. The cosmic metaphysicians believe that the 8D stargates linked to the galactic core were hijacked by regressive ETs who used black hole technologies to stop humanity from achieving spiritual ascension by blocking and distorting the gamma frequencies emanating from the source of life. Now, of course, anybody who's studied the the five frequencies that the brain cycles at, the gamma, the alpha, the beta, the theta, and the delta, gamma is the highest frequency that we can achieve, as proven by modern science, and modern EEG devices show that when we are in a deep meditative and mindfulness state, we are in that gamma frequency. This is the frequency, the God frequency, if you like. So that frequency is said to come from, science is telling us, the astrologers are telling us, and the metaphysicians are telling us that that gamma frequency is coming from the galactic core. But that frequency links to these 8D stargates that are on Earth, but that has been blocked by these regressive black hole technologies used by these malevolent ETs. With all of that said, the good news here is that the benevolent species and ETs are said to have reclaimed the galactic core and are removing or have removed all of those black hole technologies, allowing humanity, us as a species today, to have unfettered access once again to the galactic core. In practical terms, then, it wouldn't surprise us, or surprise me at least, given the energetic activations of this full moon, that the presence of the Grand Cross is a signal that that physical events may well occur in Yuan, China, in Tibet, or in Kazakhstan in the Aral Sea, where, interestingly, the World Bank has invested heavily in building a massive hydroelectric power dam and infrastructure over the top of that sea. And for those who are into, let's say, joining the dots, there's probably a reason why the World Bank has put that edifice and that structure on top of that waterway in the Aral Sea, which is said to be an 8D Earth meridian stargate linked to the galactic core.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason for that one. I love when there's more and more evidence of all these different branches of thinking, science, astrology, mythology coming together and coming to a very similar conclusion. It's beautiful to see, and thank you for joining the dots for that, and how as you said, the last one and the one about Ophiuchus, more and more is just they're overlapping, and I think that's so important. Where we as a society, we've been put into silos. I feel that we've been put into silos, and you vote for this person and you only drink this coffee, and you're really finding the people that you resonate with. But if we are able to have conversations with people that think differently, but use it coming to the same conclusion, I think we will become more and more cohesive again as a species, and we'll be able to do more and more things together. So exciting times ahead. Arcturus, close to my heart. If you've been following us for a while, I think I've shared it before that during my time of birth, the sun was on top of, or in it, conjunct with, fixed star Arcturus. So I always enjoy listening to what you have to share about Arcturus.
Yeah, such a special energy, Arcturus, and we'll do a bit of a deep dive into him. Known as the Guardian, Arcturus oversees and links to the seven stars of the Big Dipper, the Great Bear, or the Ursa Major. So those are three names for that Ursa Major. Now you can look that up. Anybody can look that up and see, astronomically and scientifically that there are seven stars in that Ursa Major, and Arcturus's location at the head or the foot, depending on which way you look at it, he is then considered to be the guardian of those seven stars. And why seven stars, and why is that so interesting in mythology and astrology? Of course, those seven stars of Ursa Major and Arcturus, of which is a part of one of those seven stars, in the Hindu belief system, the seven stars are known as the seven rishi, who mark the serpentary life cycle of 7 by 7. So That 7 by 7, there's a whole numbering system there, which we won't go fully into now, but suffice to say, it's considered to be, of all the numbers, 7 is considered to be absolutely full of divine energy. So the 7 stars, the 7 of the Ursa Major, of which Arcturus is a part. The 7 rishis or sages are represented by the 7 stars, and I've just talked about that in Ursa Major. The sages bring to Earth the knowledge and energy needed to guide us through times of transition. Through each cycle of life, the 7 times 7 cycles of youth, authority, identity, independence, crisis, authenticity, and wisdom are said to be the 7 cycles. And they are the thematics or the themes that we as a soul experience through each of those cycles. There is an evolutionary process tied to this number 7, and these 7 stars of Ursa Major, or the Big Dipper, or the Great Bear constellation, of which Arcturus is said to be the guardian or the protector of, that evolutionary process, these 7 stars are said to emit great waves of energy, of renewal and regeneration for our hearts and our minds and our spirits, or our soul, our mind, and our spirits, rather. In Egyptian law, the Great Bear is considered to be the mother of beginnings and the birthing of a new paradigm. And the protector of the Great Bear, of course, I've mentioned, is Arcturus. According to the secret doctrine of Madame Blavatsky, and those who are like the numbers will know that Blavatsky was very prominent in 1888. But Blavatsky put together this secret doctrine, known as the law of correspondences. And what that law says is that everything in the universe, let's call it the Milky Way to align this, is worked and manifested from the inside to the outside, or from the higher planes to the lower planes. And that's where the expression as above, so below comes from. Of course, that law of correspondences from the inside to the outside and from above and to below is a secret of quantum manifestation that we must believe before we see. And in this context, we believe in our hearts, we believe in our mind's eye, we believe in our imaginations before we see manifestation. Well, that principle pervades all of the Milky Way. Part of the secret doctrine talked about by Blavatsky is that all life traverses the 7 cycles of evolution, and that our constituent parts are mind, body, and soul. The sages or the rishis of the 7 rishis that we talk about in that Great Bear, the Ursa Major constellation, they talk about the cycles of necessity. And this is the reason why we exist, Sagittarius epistemology. The reason that we exist and that we've come here in this environment, in the earth, to deal with the earth and her structures, i.e. that of Ceres, the reason is the acquirement of self-consciousness or self-awareness or mind. And that occurs only via the journey through all the conditions of matter and consciousness, all 7 states from beginning to end, gaining in the process a sense of individuality and experience. So it's interesting with the second cycle of 7, which of course begins around about age 50. By that time, we are therefore, or should be therefore, more aware of these 7 cycles, so that by the time we get to the end of the second 7 cycles, which is about 90 years of age, 90 to 100 rather, it's about 100 years of age, we've mastered this process. But it's interesting that they talk about these 7 stars and therefore the 7 rishis or the 7 sages as the process of evolution, that we must experience all 7 stages in order to develop our mind. So let me go into that a little further. That development of mind or awareness occurs through the journey through matter and consciousness from beginning to end. And this is how we gain our individuality and our experiences. The sages and the secret doctrine brought through by Madame Blavatsky, over which Arcturus presides, the secret to life on this planet, as represented by Ceres, the Earth Mother, is that there can be no existence for our soul unless there is a union with matter or body through which it manifests. Our process of development then as a soul, and of course just jumping back, the souls are said to come from the galactic core, according to the Mayans and the Egyptian mythology and lore, the soul comes from there. So we come to experience matter, body, and in doing so, we go through these 7 cycles. And as we come through these 7 cycles, particularly the 7th, we create and develop wisdom, which is mind. And the evolution or unfolding of our soul firstly begins with an involution, which means that our soul inwardly expresses and manifests outwardly into a physical body. And of course, when you think about the process of conception, that's exactly what happens. And then the evolution or unfolding of our soul back into spirit again, when we connect with our mind and therefore the universal mind of understanding, awareness, universal intelligence. This is the process that we are going through when we incarnate as a soul, experience the body, which is matter, in order to experience the development of our mind and to therefore eventually leave our body and return back to mind. That is such a fascinating process that has been outlined there by the 7 sages, by the Hindu 7 stars, and it's all linked to Arcturus, who is said to be the protector of that process and of that deep wisdom. Finally, those 7 cycles again, just to recap, are youth, which are experienced between 0 and 6, authority between 7 and 13, identity between 14 and 20, independence between 21 and 27, crisis between 28 and 34, authenticity between 35 and 41, and wisdom between 42 and 49. Of course, it starts again at age 50. But effectively using that system of the 7 cycles, by the time we turn 50, we're actually back to our youth in terms of those 7 processes. We will leave it to you, our listeners and watchers, to interpret where the human soul's journey is within those 7 stages, represented by the 7 stars of the Ursa Major constellation, headed by Arcturus, who oversees this process, this evolutionary process for us. Yet, for me, it feels like we are at the beginning of a crisis period through which we must understand that this is how our collective soul comes to know itself. In other words, through the pain of the body. And it is through the physical manifestation in the body of all sorts of things that we will ultimately come to develop our mind as a species.
Yeah, I was going to say crisis as well. So I'm glad that we're thinking the same there. And it's so cool that my 2 children, one is definitely in the youth, and if you are a parent or have observed young children, I remember clearly where I would show a photo of my my own child and himself, and he'll be like, "Oh, it's a third person." He didn't recognize that it was him. So it's really interesting where now my daughter is in that authority stage, and she is definitely making sure that we know what her rules are, and she's trying to lay claim of those rules. So it's fascinating. It's such a privilege to be able to observe that with this lens, because of course we're always present to what we think is important at that time, but to be able to look at it more wholly, I thank you for that, for bringing that to my attention. So we, just for those listening, I'm just going to do a little summary of where these planetary bodies are located during this full moon, which here in New Zealand occurs on the 11th of July at 8:36 a.m. in the morning. At that time, the sun sits at 18 degrees Gemini. On the opposite side, the moon is at 22 degrees Sagittarius, making a square with both Ceres at 21 degrees Pisces, and on the other side, Arcturus sits at 30 degrees Virgo. So that beautiful geometric shape of a square on the screen. How would you like to summarize what you've shared with us today, David?
Like just before I do the quick summary, I just go back to those 7 cycles. And of course, it's so interesting that humanity and culture has expressed parts of this. Of course, the independence phase, that 7th cycle, which is the fourth of the 7 cycles between 21 and 27. Isn't it interesting that the very beginning of that still is celebrated around the world in many, many cultures in many ways? Bar mitzvahs, yard glasses, the key to the kingdom is independence. And then, of course, a crisis at 28 is the return of Saturn, the first return of Saturn, which is the conclusion of a bunch of different cycles going on. That's the first time in that crisis cycle between 28 and 34. And that the age of wisdom is said to be when we turn 40 plus. I mean, all of these things, it's interesting also how spirituality and theology actually bleeds into culture in many respects, and culture draws upon some of uh, these theological and philosophical and historical and mythological roots, but we don't necessarily identify that that's where it's come from. And this is part of this process of developing wisdom, which is Sagittarius, and saying, actually, where did that come from? Where did some of that information come from? And why am I acting and behaving and believing all of that in the first place? And that's the role of Arcturus, is to bring some of that awareness to us. But a quick summary of what we've touched on today. A grand cross. This is a rare and momentous celestial event that is used by the universal intelligence, by source, by the one, whatever your name is, to get our attention. And certainly that's what's happened today. Moon's transit through Sagittarius activates. This happens all the time. And of course, the sun's got a while before he gets there. But the transit of the moon and the sun, particularly through Sagittarius, always activates the galactic core. And that's why we're talking about it today, which is said to be the womb of creation. Scientists discovered in 2022, that was only 3 years ago, massive amounts of prebiotic molecules, including some associated with RNA, which is an aspect of our genetics, coming from and located in the galactic center. Prebiotic molecules are the building blocks of living organisms. So in other words, this is our seed code. Gemini is about communication and conversation. Sagittarius is about profound knowledge and expansion of our awareness. Ceres is the Earth Mother, the archetypes. These are all archetypes. Arcturus is the archetype or the guardian of wisdom. The 7 stars of the Ursa Major, the 7 secrets of evolution. Cosmic metaphysicians say that the galactic core links to the 8th dimensional stargates located in Xi'an, China, Lop Nor in Tibet, and the Aral Sea in Kazakhstan. The 8D communication network that links Earth's Ceres to the galactic core. There's these stargates, if you believe in that system, these meridians, that the Earth has its own meridians, and those meridian points are mirrored in the Earth itself and also in the Milky Way itself. So there's a communication between the 8D system here on Earth and those stargates and the galactic core. But that 8D communication network, which holds the knowledge of life's origins, i.e. RNA and DNA, emanates from the galactic core, which was, and I emphasize was, hijacked by regressive ETs using black hole technologies, which have now been or are in the process of being removed. And what is happening as a consequence of that is that we are being freed up. Our consciousness, or that super consciousness, the consciousness superhighway, if you like, is been, we've always had it because it's in us. But outwardly also we are beginning to experience a freeing of and a decluttering of and a clearing of the cache, if you like, technology expressions, that our connectiousness, that superhighway connection with source itself, for the earth and for us as dwellers on earth, has been freed up and is progressively becoming freer and freer for us to take advantage of.
How exciting.
Yeah.
So make the most of this little window, those listening. If you are into meditation, perhaps grab a notebook, not dots, write some things down, connect some dots, as I was trying to say. Use this Gemini energy um, in your advantage to really maybe make clear of what you want. As you shared earlier, David, the manifestation starts within. So let's let it come from inside of you, believe it, and then you'll be able to see it. I'm excited to see what it has in store for us. If you would like to know where in the chart the Galactic Core is for you, then get in touch with us for either a chart which can be purchased through the Buy Me a Coffee page, or if you would like a full-on natal reading, the links to both of those are in the description of both the YouTube video and the Spotify podcast. You can also catch us on Apple Podcasts. And I found out last week that you can also listen on Audible to our podcast. I didn't even set that up, but here we are. We are reaching more and more people, and I'm excited to see where the people are listening from. So please, when you comment, it would be so cool to see whether you're here in New Zealand or Australia, the United States. And let's get in touch. And I think, as I said before, the more and more people that come together, we can make massive changes in the world. Thank you so much, David, for sharing your knowledge.
Namaste.
Ngā mihi. Until next time.